To begin late?
Absolutely, Deputy Speaker, you may commence.
Thank you very much. Right, good afternoon to the Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Premier and Constitutional Affairs, to our fellow MPL members. I note that Honourable Cameron Dugmore, the official leader of the opposition, is on the Zoom. Very good afternoon. To Ms. Mimosa, the Chief Director of the Department of Social Development, to our colleagues and administration from the Department of Mobility, to the Secretary and all our officials from the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, and our stakeholders, a very, very good afternoon. Welcome to this live Zoom with all of you, and thank you for making the opportunity. On behalf of the speaker, I therefore will continue and run the program as per the agenda. It is my distinct privilege to welcome every one of you on this occasion. I would like to recognise the members of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, the representatives, as I said, from the Western Cape government departments, and of course, the most important, as I've said, the stakeholders that have taken the time to talk to us, because only when we hear your voice can we be your voice in Parliament. One of the key priorities of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament is to be citizen-centric Parliament. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament values the people that it represents and actively seeks engagement with the citizens of the Western Cape. We also strive to be responsive to our citizens. During public engagement programs that took place throughout the province since 2019, it again has become apparent that there are some communities in the province that face significant challenges, ranging from the ability to access services, mobility in terms of the use of public and other forms of transport, and special needs education, including safety, access to employment, and other social matters. People living with disabilities have raised a clear and uniform voice seeking our attention. And for that reason, we are here today for you to make your voices heard, but also so that we can apply our minds with a view to improving the lives of all people in this magnificent province. We have invited the Departments of Social Development and Mobility, as well as the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Premier and Constitutional Matters, to speak to you briefly. But we've also invited the members of the standing committees, including Social Development and Mobility, and other members of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament to listen to the matters that you will raise, with a view to represent your needs in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. The Premier of the Western Cape, the Honourable Alan Winde, indicated that he too wants to listen to you and will join us this afternoon. So I don't want to take up any more of your time that we have together. I once again welcome you and I look forward to your engagement today. I now call on the chairperson, Honourable Fry, to come and address the Zoom session this afternoon. Over to you, Honourable Fry.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honourable guests and my fellow honourable members, I was delighted to learn that the Western Cape Provincial Parliament will host an event on equal access to the enjoyment of all human rights for people living with disabilities. I was delighted because the Western Cape is one of the provinces in the country that has gone above and beyond to ensure that all our residents, particularly those who are disadvantaged by poverty or other factors such as disabilities, have equal access to opportunities and can thus compete on a level playing field with others. Of course, much more work remains to be done, but today we honour and commend the efforts made thus far. In my capacity as Chairman of the Premier and Constitutional Matters, I'm fortunate to have witnessed firsthand some of the opportunities made available for those living with disabilities. When I visited the Cape Access Centre in Wellington about 2 months ago, I was pleased to see how the facilities are designed in an accessible manner towards persons living with disabilities. The Cape Access Initiative is intended to ensure that residents in the Western Cape who do not have access to the internet or computer devices in their homes are not left behind and are provided with free access to these services. The centre in Wellington has easily accessible parking for persons with disabilities, as well as wheelchair-friendly entrances. It was unfortunate that this centre had to be temporarily closed down due to the impact of load shedding. The theft of a server, a UPS, and PCs resulted in considerable expenditure for the replacement of the stolen equipment, theft that occurred during load shedding hours when it was dark. The Western Cape government's 1.1 billion rand investment in energy over the 3-year medium-term expenditure framework will result in eradicating such barriers towards service delivery and access to essential services such as e-centres in the province. Honourable members and honourable guests, the foundation of every nation's democracy is the enjoyment of equal access to opportunities for all. Residents are more inspired and involved when they have equitable access to opportunities they can use to upskill themselves. This leads to improved productivity and better outcomes for society as a whole. Equal access to opportunities is a fundamental human right that should be safeguarded and promoted by all individuals, organizations, and governments throughout. The Premier's Advancement of Youth Programme, or the PAY programme, is administered by the Department of the Premier, has always prioritized the inclusion of people living with disabilities. Year after year, the department encourages people living with disabilities to apply for the program so that they too can acquire the necessary skills for employment. This is because in the Western Cape, we believe no one should be left behind or excluded from accessing life-changing opportunities. The PAY program is intended for former matric learners in the Western Cape who desire to obtain experience and training in one of the Western Cape government's 13 departments. This program has been a massive success and especially prioritized those who have no network or support to help them make better and informed career choices after high school. The Western Cape government is committed to promoting the inclusion and rights of people with disabilities across the province. The Standing Committee on the Department of the Premier and Constitutional Matters plays an important role in holding the government to account and ensuring that targets for attaining equity for disabled persons are accomplished. Throughout this financial year, the committee will do everything in its capacity to guarantee that we carry out our oversight responsibilities and visit centres targeted at empowering those who live with disabilities. Furthermore, the committee will continue to invite different ministries within the Western Cape government to track their progress toward attaining equity and equality in the province. Valued guests, this government is one of the few in the country that continues to lift up marginalized people and provide them with opportunities in education, housing, and other domains. This is a reality that millions of Western Cape residents can attest to, though more can still be done. The Standing Committee remains proud of the work done by the Western Cape government, which guarantees access and realization of the right to access opportunities by all our residents. Thank you for attending this roundtable discussion, and I look forward to your valued input in these matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Fry, and it really is promising to hear that we are actively helping and assisting through the pay program of which government is doing to assist our minority communities who are struggling to have jobs and housing and access to opportunities in general. I just want to say that the themes which we will be covering here this afternoon will center itself around accessibility, mobility, and societal integration. And with that in mind, I would like to welcome Ms. Mimosa, the Chief Director of Social Development from the Department of Social Development. Ms. Mimosa, are you available to address us? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Firstly, I'm the Director, not the Chief Director.
An error, thank you very much. The Director from Social Development.
Yes.
A very warm welcome. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker, and also acknowledging the Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Premier and Constitutional Matters, members of the Western Cape Provincial Legislature, my colleagues from Western Cape Government, and also to the representatives from the disability sector. Thank you so much. I will share my presentation. Can you all see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much, Ms. Mimosa.
Thank you so much. I've been asked to talk to what is the status of accessibility to opportunities, information and government services to persons with disabilities. The manner in which to approach this statement or this question posed is to look as to the legislative and policy framework that informs our work, and also the mandate of the Department of Social Development and the funded programs, and also to touch on the challenges that we have. If we look at the statement, it says status of accessibility to opportunities, information and government services to persons with, it's a very broad statement, but I will zoom and speak directly to the Department of Social Development mandate. I've been given only 10 minutes for my presentation, so I'll try and congest everything within these 10 minutes. Starting with the legislative framework that informs our work. In this sector, especially the disability sector, what informs our work is the white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities, and also its implementation metrics. This is the most and the crucial policy framework that guides services to persons with disabilities. And also to mention then that this is a transversal policy that speaks across all government departments. And if we look at the white paper on the rights of persons, it reflects or it addresses the issues of disability mainstreaming, and also it reflects the specific services that each line function department should do in order to provide services to persons with disabilities. So it touches across all government departments, and it's specific as to what each government department's responsibility is when it comes to services to persons with disabilities. Meaning then that this provision of services to persons with disabilities, it's everybody's business. Every department has got a role to play. And even every stakeholder, like the NGO sector, persons with disabilities, everyone has got a role to play. And also it emphasizes the importance of collaboration, working together collectively in provision of services. Also, what informs our work is especially now as the Department of Social Development, is our national policy on social development services to persons with disabilities, of which is also crucial to mention that this policy is under review and has been approved by Cabinet on the 2nd of November last year to be gazetted for public comments. So, and as a result, the National Department of Social will be crisscrossing the provinces to come and solicit the inputs and the comments from the public in the province. So this is our policy, that is National Policy on Social Development Services to Persons. It reinforces what is promoted by the white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities. Looking at the mandate of social development as to what is the reason of our existence as the Department of Social Development, it is good to mention that, our reason for existence is to ensure provision of comprehensive network of social development services, services that enable and empower the poor, the vulnerable, and those with special needs. Also, it furthermore, to ensuring the provision of services, we cannot run away from the fact that as the Department of Social Development, we cannot ensure the provision of this service, leaving behind our stakeholders and civil society organizations. We provide the services in partnership with them. And also guided by our policy on the provision of social development services. Our policies mainly refers to disability-specific support interventions. And I would love to mention that in the financial year, this current financial 23-2024, a budget of 164 million has been made available. If we refer to disability-specific support services, we're referring to our residential care facilities, that is the 24-hour care facilities for persons with disabilities, our daycare services or daycare centers for both the children and adults with disabilities, protective workshop, and also our social service organizations. And also, I want also to mention that as the Department of Social Development, we received an earmarked allocation for the procurement of vehicles. And to date, we've procured 6 vehicles, and we've already had our MEC handed over to the special care centers. It's to enable our children with disabilities to be transported to and from the centers, to ensure then that they also participate and also are given an opportunity to attend the daycare services, that is the educational programs and the stimulation programs that are being rendered in the special care centers. And we are currently in the process of procuring additional 6 vehicles, which are going to be handed as well before the end of this financial year. Also to mention is the special allocation of 5 million for a special care center in Lentegeye, which is mainly to accommodate children, adolescents, and adults with mental health diagnosis. Also, what is important to mention is that as the department, especially when it comes to provision of services, the disability-specific support services, we're not there are key departments that we are working closely with. I would like to mention the Department of Health, because it plays a very critical and a crucial role in this service provision. Also, the Western Cape Education Department, especially when it comes to the special care centers for children with disabilities. Also, our policy on provision of social development services to persons with disability also addresses or promotes disability mainstreamed services across all departments, programs, and services. And as the department, I would say we are striving towards, and we're already seeing the improvement, the progression. For instance, I would like to mention then that some of the Department of Social Development programs and services, they've already started embracing disability. They've already started embracing, ensuring that the accessibility of the services to persons with disabilities. To mention a few, I would mention childcare and protection, and funds have already been made available for the training of safety parents to take care of children with special needs, especially children who have been found to be in need of care and protection. Also, to mention that even the statutory child care and protection services, the service they're embracing and accommodating children with disabilities who are also found to be children in need of care and protection. Our child and youth care centers, they are taking on board also children with disabilities who are also found to be in need of care and protection. Also to mention, we've got our own Department of Social Development facility for children with intellectual disability, Sivuyile, which is at Stickland Grounds. And also to mention the Victim Empowerment Program, also persons with disabilities benefiting from their programs, especially the gender-based violence victims. The VEP program, it embraces and also includes and accommodates persons with disabilities. Old age homes, it's also crucial to mention that, because in terms of the Older Persons Act, old age homes are supposed to take 60 older persons from 60 years and above. But the Western Cape Department of Social Development made a concession so that even persons with disabilities between the ages of 55 and 60 who are not yet there, reached this age of 60, based on the challenges or the experiences that they encounter, to be accommodated in the old age homes. And also to mention then that our old age homes, they accommodate and embrace disability as well, because you'll find our persons with disabilities in the old age homes, except for the residential care facilities. So the scope is broadening to make services available. Our social workers working in the homeless shelters, they are also undergoing training. Some have been trained to identify also issues of disabilities and refer. I cannot leave out to say that all these are funded programs, and as the department, we also conducting or monitoring to ensure that we follow our funds. Apart from following our funds supervision, we also provide assistance and to capacitate the NGOs when the need arises or in the areas of need. Lastly, from my side is also, I cannot leave out to indicate as to what challenges that we have. Budgetary constraints is the main, which is hindering the progress and also impacting on the service delivery. If I'm were to mention is then that in the disability sector, especially in the disability program, we have not received, the NPOs working in the sector, they have not received an increase on subsidy for the past 8 years. And if you look at the stagnant funding, stagnant subsidy, yet the costs are rising. It indeed shows then that service out there, service that is aimed at persons with disabilities and their family is being negatively impacted. On that note, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mimosa, for a great presentation. I think the biggest concern that I hear from you is the lack of increase of a budget for the past 8 years. In fact, that is really, really concerning to hear, and I know you have no ability to change that. It's the budget that is allocated to you from a national department. But really thank you for the hard work that the Social Development Department has had to do over the past 3 or 4 years, particularly during the lockdown when people did not have access to food and shelter and other services that they needed. So thank you very much, Ms. Mimosa, for being here and presenting to us. I would like to now call on our Department of Mobility. I'm not sure who, if it's Mr. Rob and Collins. There we go. Mr. Collins, thank you very much. A very good afternoon. So just to say that, Mr. Collins, this and to our guests, the Department of Mobility is probably just over a week old. And hence why I wasn't quite sure who was presenting, but this is a very, very exciting department going forward. It's new, it's got massive potential, but the focus here in this Zoom will really be on mobility for people with disabilities. So thank you very much, Mr. Collins. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair, Deputy Speaker, and all on the platform. Thank you for this opportunity. Mr. Rob will be flighting the presentation, but I just thought I'm going to have to just introduce, obviously, from our side, we focus very specifically on the element of mobility, albeit that the department is only a week old. There's a lot of work that has been done from a mobility perspective under the old department, which we are obviously wanting to push forward. And we also want to highlight the role that we've already played, specifically with regard to universal accessibility for people with disabilities. And fortunately or unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, we couch the ambit of disability much wider in terms of the National Land Transport Act when we have to look at catering for people with disabilities. But that will come out more clearly, I think, in the presentation of Mr. Rob. We obviously welcome any opportunity to better ourselves and become better at what we are doing. And as a result of that, has formed some valuable partnerships from a mobility perspective to ensure that we do not leave anybody behind in terms of access to mobility or access to mobility in the space that we operate. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Rob. I'll hand over to you. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins. Over to you, Mr. Rob. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Deputy Speaker. Afternoon to all on the platform. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my presentation. Deputy Speaker, if you can maybe just confirm if that is up on your screen.
Yes, it is. You may proceed loud and clear, and I can see your presentation.
Great, thank you so much. I hope I'll do justice to the 10 minutes. This is quite a complex environment we operate in. There's a lot we're doing behind the scenes to squeeze into the time, but I really hope and trust we'll get value out of this today.
Mr. Rob, before you begin, you've got time. We're slightly early, so if it's complex, just go slower. We're well away. You've got a bit of time. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. Colleagues, yes, so I think we really wanted to start from a Department of Mobility saying what is accessible public transport. And that for us is where all public transport networks, and this is really regardless of mode, can provide that inclusive service that accommodates passengers with special categories of need, or otherwise known as universal access or UA passengers. And this really includes people living with disabilities, but it's obviously a lot broader than just persons living with disabilities. As a mobility department, we're really striving to ensure that there's accessible public transport for all users. And this is really by pursuing interventions that are twofold. Firstly, to all new transport systems and supporting infrastructure being universally accessible. And then secondly, looking back at all existing systems and infrastructure being upgraded, obviously over time, to the same standard or to meet the same outcome. So Advocate Collins has mentioned, this mandate is underpinned by the National Land Transport Act, which interestingly defines UA passengers quite broadly, and those are passengers with special categories of need, people with disabilities, pregnant women, those who are limited in their movements by children, life cycle passengers, signage passengers, female passengers, and load-carrying passengers. So as you can see, our mandate in terms of provision of service is quite broad. I think very importantly for us is that accessible public transport focuses not only on physical access, but also on spatial access, how close you are to a service, our service proximity, what we call temporal access, so how frequently does a service service the area where I am, and of course, what is the user cost? If the cost is stopping me from using the service, then is the service really accessible? So the department subscribes to and really encourages what we call a complete travel chain design philosophy. And importantly, this places the emphasis on all the elements of the trip and really not just the physical journey itself. I think often the challenge is that when one thinks of public transport, you think of the trip from the time you board the vehicle to the time you alight the vehicle. In our perspective, it's a lot broader than that. And on the screen, you'll see a small diagram. And if I can just briefly take us through it, it really starts at point one, which is, how do I find out information about the service I'd like to use? Is that information accessible? Can I find timetables? Is it easy for me to read no matter what my disability? Is it easy enough for me to stand? Then how do I get to the bus stop? Or to whatever public transport stop? Am I able to make my way there in terms of infrastructure? Is the signage and wayfinding adequate? If I maybe struggle to read letters, are there numbers as well? If I struggle to read numbers, are there letters as well with the signage? And then we get to stage 3, which is actually getting onto the public transport vehicle. There's obviously then our trip on the vehicle, all important things on the vehicle, such as audio announcers and ability to see and hear where the next bus stop is, the ability to easily communicate with the driver and understand information on the vehicle. And then it's about getting off. Then I get off at my next stop. Can I actually get to my destination safely? Is it accessible, or do I end up on a stop in the middle of nowhere where I actually can't get anywhere? And of course, we go right the way through to the end of the cycle, where it also includes giving feedback. Am I able to give feedback in an accessible manner? Are there different opportunities for me? Maybe I can't see, maybe I can't hear, whatever the case is, but are there different methods for me to be able to give feedback no matter what my need or my disability is? And I think this is essentially the fundamental core of what we're looking at as the mobility department. Just very quickly, obviously, the various interventions we're busy with, they depend on one or more of the following elements. It's not always the same in every project or program. But the various elements of universal access, or UA, that we look at includes fixed infrastructure design, and this is including improvements in roads, sidewalks, other public transport related facilities. Then looking at your actual network planning and your operations monitoring of the service. Also around marketing communications, and this includes, as I've said, with the travel chain, the customer care, the information material, wayfinding and signage, websites, etc. Then the actual vehicles, there are various programs and interventions we run on the vehicles, as I've mentioned, things like audio announcers, clear signage, etc. Announcements when doors open so one can be safe on the vehicle. And then looking at things like your fare system and your fare collection systems. Where do you purchase your ticket, or your top up your card, or whatever the type of fare material is that you're using? At those points where you do need to purchase that ticket, is it accessible? Are you able to get there? Are you able to hear? Are you able to understand what's required? And the same with driver and operational staff training. There's very many elements around that of how a person's treated while undertaking the journey. So, of course, there are various specific interventions, and this includes to varying degrees, the funding, development, and or implementation of things such as what we call UA guidance notes, design standard specifications, including even material palettes. Is there sufficient color contrast between the different building materials being used? Things such as UA stakeholder forums, where we're able to really engage with our various stakeholders. Then there's also specialist consultant services in the universal accessibility space, and many times our projects or programs require that specialist skill and intervention, and then also regular audits and appraisals to actually make sure the quality of what we're doing and whether it's actually meeting the purpose. Just very briefly, in terms of what the Department of Mobility is currently doing, we're working with several municipalities, as well as national government departments and stakeholder groups in an effort to really achieve sustainable accessibility. Just some of these projects include the George Municipality through the George Integrated Public Transport Network, or GIPTN, the City of Cape Town through the Dial a Ride program, the Overstrand Municipality, and this is through the Provincial Sustainable Transport Program, or PSTP, and similarly Stellenbosch Municipality through the PSTP. Then with the National Department of Transport, busy with assistance to develop specifications and standards for what we term a universally accessible minibus for public transport services in South Africa. There's been some historical work done in the past with the Intergovernmental Forum for the Right to Education for Children with Severe to Profound Disabilities, and that was through our Government Motor Transport Department. And then also peer-to-peer learning exchanges that we're currently undertaking with other provinces. We're busy engaging with other cities such as Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, and even as far afield as some bus and other public transport companies across the world. One of them, for instance, being TransLink, the Northern Ireland bus company. So just to give the platform a little bit of an idea, just 2 or 3 examples, if I may. This was some of the work done at Overstrand Municipality, specifically on non-motorized transport priority projects. And I think what one will see from the examples that, again, each program or intervention is very different. It's context specific, it's budget dependent, and it really depends what the priority and the needs are on that specific project or program at the time. So just very briefly, the PSTP, or Provincial Sustainable Transport Project, was established to implement a responsible, sustainable and stepwise approach to public transport, as well as non-motorized or NMT transport in identified municipalities. An example of this is here on the screen in Overstrand Municipality with the completion of a continuous NMT link between various streets and the CBD. And there were various improvements made to several intersections. So as you can see in the photo, it is easier and safer for pedestrians to move from their origin to their destination. Again, on the screen now, just various photos of before and after. One looks from left to right in both blocks. You can see what the environment looked like before the time that pedestrians had to endure, versus the facilities that they can now enjoy to ensure not only safety but ease of mobility. Moving on to one of our other projects, being the George Integrated Public Transport Network, or Go George bus service. There's a lot one can talk about on this project as well. But I think just a lot of work in terms of vehicles, as I've said, that have been specially adapted with audio announcers, visual announcements. All the vehicles have been made universally accessible through the use of ramps or hoists. A lot of work from a communication side as well, ensuring that part of that travel chain, that all our websites, all our marketing information, all our marketing staff there in George that deal with passengers can all do sign language. And just a lot of work put into awareness on all levels of the project around disability and universal access. Some of the elements of work specifically in George have included the annual development of a universal design access plan, which is council approved. As I've said before, development of standards, policies and guidelines. Also making sure that there's universal access input into things like the public transport bylaw, the passenger charter, the rules of carriage. So anywhere where there's a policy statement or some sort of guideline to make sure that have we taken into account all the elements of universal accessibility. Importantly, in George was the development of a training program, including actually the design of a board game and experiential training specifically to take public transport drivers through the experience and through sensitivity training in terms of universal access and persons with disabilities. Again, regular audits of the vehicles, the infrastructure, etc. Also regular testing of the service. We often have groups going up to George to, as you can see in the photo, for instance, test the vehicles with guide dogs, with other forms of mobility devices, wheelchairs, etc. An establishment of a dedicated work stream and a forum to make sure that the voice of the various stakeholders is really trying to be heard as far as possible. Then another example, the City of Cape Town with the Dial a Ride. Importantly, the service is only available to persons living with disabilities and who were assessed by an occupational therapist who was appointed by the city for this purpose. Eligible applicants are registered on the Dial a Ride database, and the database currently comprises approximately 2,347 eligible users. The current vehicle fleet is around 13 vehicles, and all vehicles have 5 wheelchair spaces. And incredibly, for the 21-22 financial year, the service operated an average of 4,400 trips, carrying an average of 3,600 passengers per month. Just to note, the service is being provided from the nearest point, closest to the scheduled pickup or drop-off point, and obviously where it is safe to do so. Our role as Department of Mobility in this service. This is co-funded by the City of Cape Town as well as the Mobility Department. And currently, our Mobility Department, we contribute a total transfer of around 10 million per annum towards this project. Deputy Speaker, this, I hope, gives, in brief, just an idea of some of the projects we're busy with. As I've said, there are so very many elements which one really needs to consider when undertaking any public transport intervention or program. And hopefully this has given everyone a small taste for what it is that we are pursuing on a daily basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rob. I think you largely talk to infrastructure that talks to, for example, impaired vision. I remember when I was a councillor many years ago about how the traffic lights had the beeping noise, and that now traffic lights usually at an intersection, all 4 will have pedestrian crossing green so that you can actually walk around rather than just a one way. And these all talk to accommodating people with various various impairments that allow them to be able to safely cross the road. I think also, Mr. Rob, what's very important is, and where we perhaps don't talk enough about it, is the behavioral change that is required by the average citizen. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, crossing a road, the minute you're on that pedestrian crossing, the cars will stop no matter. But yet here we still have a lawless behavior from the average citizen on driving across a pedestrian crossing when people are crossing. And I think it requires some government intervention, or perhaps through your department, to find creative ways of re-educating the public to take care of people in the streets, crossing over, cycling, etc. Thank you very much, Mr. Rob. To all my stakeholders now, we would like to break just for 10 minutes, in fact, may I say 5 minutes, just to have a quick break where we will then move on to provide a platform for inputs by the various stakeholders. So if you could just leave your cameras off, we will put a timer on and we will call you back as soon as the conference reconvenes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. you're all still connected. We're now going to open the second half of the roundtable discussion with our societal stakeholders, and any inputs from today's Zoom from you as either as individuals or as stakeholders in general around the themes of accessibility, mobility, and societal integration. So to ladies and gentlemen, if I can ask you, the way to get recognized is to push the raise hand function. If you look for it, it's a little hand that goes like that. You push the raise hand function and I will recognize you. Our administration are taking notes and they will record your input. Give me a second. Let me just start. I do see Honourable Brunke's, I do see you, but I will give 1 second. I note the Provincial Director of Deaf South Africa. If you could just introduce yourself, where you're from for the record, and we will then recognise you. Over to you. Hi, sir. Over to you. Please put your microphone on.
Hello. Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hello, and a very warm welcome.
Today. The interpreter will be voicing over for me, which WCPP has provided for me. So it's not that the one interpreter on screen is doing nothing, the other interpreter is voicing for me. To the Honourable Chairperson and all the members and the facilitators of today, it's a very, very big honour for me to be here, and I think this discussion is very valuable. I'm very passionate in the field of disability, and I've got a lot of goosebumps about this happening within WCPP. I've come a long way also in engagements with the Premier's department and making sure that they reach their disability targets. It was a bit quiet for a while, but I see you guys are now finally back at it. So I'm happy to be working with you and as one of your stakeholders. In one of the presentations, I found it very informative and proud to say and happy to see that Western Cape is one of the provinces leading in that department. So well done to the Western Cape departments for their efforts in the disability sector. Just a few things that I have picked up. Obviously, we're not here to debate or to argue, but we just want to drop some hints or some seeds to WCPP and the departments from the disability sector side. For many years in the deaf community and deaf organizations, I'm at DEFSA, which is in the Western Cape region. We have different stakeholders, the different deaf schools, different deaf organizations, clubs, etc., that are affiliated to us. We've picked up many challenges within those different organizations with, for example, it being with government staff, senior management staff, HODs in the different departments. Are they clearly aware of how to work with disability? Not always, because they don't work with disabilities on a different on that level. Also within departments, maybe they don't encounter disabled staff, so they're not aware of how to deal with disability. So something that we would like to see more from the disabled sector is having disabled people within your departments to assist in making sure that you are providing accessibility, etc., for the disabled. I've been advocating for many, many years in the disability sector, and we are still facing many struggles that we faced back then. With regards also to white paper and the policies and that, I think for the disability sector and for us, we've been discussing this document for over 15 years. And what we really want is the implementation of that white paper. We want to see more proactivity. We want to see, yes, you are planning many, many things, or we plan many, many things. But when it comes to implementation, sometimes we lack in that. And it's important that in the departments, disabled people, if you have disabled projects, disabled people need to lead those projects. Whether your project is for the blind, for the physically disabled, you need to have those disability sectors lead in the projects. Then with mobility, with universal accessibility and universal access, it's something that we've also been discussing for many years, but the reality is, like, the implementation is a bit of a lack in that sector for the disabled. or for us, for our disability sector in advance. We want to also be involved in the planning process. I did love the diagram that was shared from the department, but we also missed a few points, is that crime impacts that. The crime rates is high in South Africa or in Western Cape also. Are you preventing, or what preventative measures are you putting in place in case crime impacts? Because we all know public transport is impacted by crime. I'm proudly from Elsie's River, and I've seen a lot of crime happen in that area, especially in the disadvantaged areas. Children that don't have any respect, that have chosen the crime route or whatever the case may be. Those things happen on a daily basis. More like I would say from the disadvantaged communities. So what preventative measures and protection measures are you putting in place for the different communities, especially in terms of disability? Then for the universal, again on universal accessibility, we have Western Cape Network on Disability. So that's a perfect network that you guys can use, or to advise on what's best in terms of transport measures, what projects you can put in place, leading the projects. There are many people on the disability network within the Western Cape that can assist you in terms of consultancy, etc. On my side, what I would like to see in the future is more people from the disabled sector leading projects like this. What are we here for? Disability roundtable. Yes. Sorry. So I'm quite excited that this has happened, and I'm hoping that more of this is coming. Please don't let this be a once-off engagement, or just because it's the start of the financial year and we come back again next year. I would like to see this happen possibly maybe once a month, or maybe something that can be mandated to the different constituencies or the different NGOs, that there will be more implementation done. We don't just want it to be something that's done on paper. Yes, we know we have to follow certain criteria, etc., and there's tick boxes that need to be made, but implementation, and also the people that are disabled, they are suffering. And many of them are suffering, and many of them are still facing barriers to education, to health, to social services, etc. So things that I've experienced and that I've seen also. Part-time, I just wanted to note, I am a TV presenter, and I always look for where we see accessibility stories in the disabled field, that where accessibility is important. So we don't only focus on the Western Cape, we focus on all disabilities in different departments. So from my side, thank you so much again, and I hope that we continue this roundtable engagements for future. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the program director and the in the sign language interpreter for your input. It is very well received. I'm going to move directly on to Honourable Khalil Brinkhuis, one of my colleagues and members of Parliament of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Over to you.
Oh, no, thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Always great to see you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to everybody on the platform. Yes, Honourable Deputy Speaker, I must say I'm also very excited, very excited with the WCPP, the Western Cape Government, hosting this platform for people of disabilities, and how we can accommodate the community of disability people with disabilities. I want to. I have a constituency office in Mitchells Plain, and over the time, the many years, I had a lot of engagement with parents in the Mitchells Plain area that has children with disabilities. And many of these children, they go to various schools all around the city of Cape Town. So they make use of some transport which is accommodated by the city of Cape Town. One of our colleagues here on the platform just mentioned previously that there's a program of the city of Cape Town, Dial a Ride, that a lot of parents are making use of for their disabled children to transport them to schools. In this one instance, one of the parents has, in fact, while I was busy listening to yourself, Deputy Speaker, and to the other colleagues, I was on the phone also at the same time with a parent that mentioned that their child, they are from Mitchells Plain, and the child is transported with this transport of the City of Cape Town, the dial-a-ride transport, to an area in Cape Town called Newlands. So sometimes they come fetch the child, and sometimes they are not able to fetch the child. Now, the parent is asked me that I convey this message. First of all, she's very grateful, very, very grateful, and she appreciates what the municipality of the City of Cape Town is doing for the citizens here in Cape Town. And but in the same breath, she wants to bring it to the attention of the Western Cape government. If the Western Cape government will play the oversight role over the municipalities, she wants to bring it to the attention of the Western Cape government that these are some of the issues, that is plaguing them in terms of their learners' transport to various schools around Cape Town. So, like I say, she did convey to me that they are highly appreciative for the service that is rendered, but they would like to also bring up this issue that sometimes the transport is available and sometimes it is not. That puts the parent sometimes into a difficulty in fetching the disabled children. So if the Western Cape maybe can look into some of those issues and see how they can assist these parents, it will also be very highly appreciated. No, thank you very much for this opportunity, Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Honourable Brinkhuis. Can I just ask that whoever speaks, in the interest of, for example, Deaf South Africa, so that they can see your face, it makes it much easier for them to be able to associate persons speaking, etc. So I then recognise, thank you very much to the Honourable Brinkhuis. I now recognise Erica du Toit.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Yes, my name's Erica du Toit. I'm with the Western Cape Association of 4 persons with disabilities, and I'm also representing the Western Cape Network on disabilities. And I wanted to start just with congratulating James Robb on his presentation. It was a super presentation, loaded with information, but what I liked most about it was that it was accessible. He explained the slides, he used simple language, he spoke slowly and clearly, and very, very seldom have I heard anybody put forward a presentation in that way. So thank you so much. I wanted to just 2 comments, and something else that Mr. Robb also referred to was universal access in terms of all categories of impairment. So oftentimes universal access and universal design are spoken of in terms of wheelchair access. And while that's required, it is not everything. So he did speak about audio descriptions. For example, this meeting should actually have had captions on it so that it's accessible to those with a hearing impairment, but who don't use a signed language. And there are a tremendous amount of that. But he also, Jabbar also mentioned the Western Cape Network. And here I want to just mention, we have had as a network a communication with various City of Cape Town and provincial departments, but we would love to put ourselves forward to work very closely with the Department of Mobility. We represent 88 organizations that are members of ours across the province, covering all categories of disability. So if you're looking for a single organization with which to work, I would recommend you work with the Western Cape Network on Disability. Thank you for this opportunity, and I echo what Jabbar says. Please let this not be the very last one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toy, and thank you for pointing out that we didn't have captions on. I trust that you can see the captions that I've just switched on for you. If not, just go to the view, go to the More section. Under More, you can look at language and speech. Thank you. I now recognize, sorry, my computer. I now recognize Mr. Bongani Yamba. Over to you, sir.
Yes, greeting to everyone. Thank you very much, Beverly. Your meeting is started very well with a nice presentation. Thanks to the organizers. Let me echo what Erica just indicated, that we would love to have this platform more often than once. Just before I just get to these 2 points that I just want to raise, as I'm thanking the organizers of this platform. Firstly, we are not persons living with disabilities. We are people with disabilities, not living with disabilities. That's one. Thanks. I was listening to Ms. Momoza with regard to how the DSD conducting the business. Yes, they are doing well, and in most cases, yes, at least they have covered us big time. But however, now the budget seems to be shrinking as the years go by, and it makes it difficult for us now to reach out all the targets, and that's something that at least the government needs to look at, because the target is still big, but the money is going down all the time, and really you cannot be expected to reach out to 2,000 people a year in a very small budget of almost, but for the rest of the other stuff, as she indicated, they are doing very well. I think the other thing that I think Jabbar mentioned was this issue of self-representation. And I think that one is going deep. Hence, as people with disabilities, in fact, especially at DPSA, Disabled People South Africa, we've advocated for many times around the issue of having a disability desk centered at the Premier's office, so that he can be able to all these departments. Because I, for one, as DPSA, we really don't believe to these transversal positions, because in the end, those people are just given an extension of the work, not the actual job that they must do now. As if we are not taken serious. I'm not trying to be negative about it, but I'm trying to be honest about it. That at least if this is given to somebody that can look at it and work in it as everyday life, not an extension of work, like what we were complaining about 2 years ago when this disability desk was stationed at DSD, where almost everyone who was there, none of them were persons with disabilities, and that did not even have a budget, which means it was just some kind of a window dressing. And when we try to engage around the issues of the life of it, as to how long will it last and what are the plans for it in the next 5 years, and there was no actual answers around that. As a result, 8 months later, we heard that now there's no longer a disability desk at DSD, which was really astonishing. So those are the things that a little bit need government now to work with us around that thing. At least the disability desk, if it's still gonna come back again, at least it must be there at the Premier's office, so that it can be able to oversee everything that is happening in this province. But so far, I believe we are still at least on the right track compared to some areas or somewhere elsewhere. But at least we need to do more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yamba, and thank you for those very, very important points that you have raised. I now recognize, give me a second, Monwebisi. I hope that's your name, or if it's your surname, if you could just please introduce yourself. I'm just reading it off the screen. Over to you. Do we have Monwebisi? Yes. If I can see your camera. If somebody can assist. Monwebisi, what I'll do is I'll move over to the next one. I'll come back to you if you can perhaps get some assistance on making yourself heard. I'm going to move on to, is it Nicholas Lugia or Lugia Nicholas? I can't make out whether it's a name, surname. You can introduce, there you go. Is it Lugia Nicholas?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's Luigi Nicholas.
Luigi Nicholas, beautiful name. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you for this opportunity as well. I'm Luigi Nicholas. I work at Stellenbosch University in the disability unit, and I'm also a blind individual. So I also have a guide dog, and that's relevant to my question. So I know our speaker spoke about the plans that they have for transport within the different areas that they're working in. And I work closely with Stellenbosch Municipality with their transport plan as well. But one of our biggest issues isn't the accessibility of our policies or our implementation of our policies and the accessibility around our venues and things like that, but it's more around the people aspect, and also monitoring whether or not the people working in those areas have the correct training. So I wanted to ask our speakers who presented on the mobility and transport, what is the plan with regards to monitoring the training that personnel will receive when they work in the transport areas and different aspects around accessibility, because as a person with a disability myself, my main issue when it comes to the everyday life is more around the people and their attitudes towards disabilities, especially when it comes to guide dogs or any service dogs as well. So yeah, I think that's one of the main concerns I have, is just around the monitoring, like is there a monitoring process in place? And then also the accountability if someone, discriminates against a person with a disability, which does happen on a regular basis. So what is the plan in action for those procedures? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luigi. And it's such an important point you've raised, because it's something I've raised again, is how do we educate the public on the right attitude towards people with disabilities, in particular guide dogs getting in cars. I was once on a plane where the entire plane was full of guide dogs because the people had just come back from a conference. And it was an incredible experience. You would have the dogs be sitting with their paws on your feet, but we just need to have an open tolerance level to something that is unusual. And when guide dogs are with their owners walking, we can always just make space, allow the dog to be able to move in the space that he's allowed to ensure that his owner gets across safely across the street. So thank you very much, Luigi, for raising the issue of training aspects and educating the public. I'm going to move on to, is Monwebisi, are you able to still get on? If you can, I can see, yes, hello? There you go. I can see you. I still can't hear you, but I can see you, sir. Monwebisi, is it perhaps your sound is perhaps down? I can see you're not on mute, but I can't seem to be able to hear you. No. I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask if the IT department can somehow dial you in so that you are able to speak. So just hang on there. I will give you a moment to speak. We have a technical hitch with you. I'm going to move on one with BC, and then I will give you an opportunity as soon as you are sorted. Hang in there. Okay. I now recognize Wilfred. You may come online. If IT can please assist Monwin BC. Thank you. Wilfred, over to you. You maybe want to put your camera on. There we go.
Camera's on.
There we go.
And can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Deputy Speaker. Thanks for the opportunity, and good afternoon to everybody else. My name is Wilfred Diedrichs. I'm the CEO at Cape Town Association for the Physically Disabled, based here in Bridgetown, Athlone. I just want to know, do we have access to the mobility department, or how would we go about engaging with them? Because I want to expand on the comment that Mr. Brinker has made. There's lots of work still to be done with Dial-A-Ride. Dial-A-Ride is I think it's a good system if we can capacitate it properly. And so obviously we can't deal with the issues here. There's not enough time, but if we can deal with the mobility department, I'd like to do so. Or maybe we can do it through the disability network. And then just another point, I just want to echo what Ms. Mimosa said about the increase, because we employ 17 staff in our social worker department, and we haven't had increases for at least 4 years. And we can't really work. I don't know if we can retain this staff for much longer. So it's something that I think should be looked at. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wilfred. I'm sorry, I don't see your surname, and I will certainly ask the administration for an opportunity to be able to connect with mobility. I'm sure that my administration could possibly send you an email or send everybody emails on how to actually engage with our various departments. Yes, it's very important to create those stakeholder lists to which the departments engage with on a regular basis. And I'm sure Mr. Rob would want that. Thank you very much, Wilfred. I recognize, I just see the word director. Over to you.
Thank you. Hello.
There we go.
Hi, so I'm Gail David from the Western Cape Forum for Intellectual Disability.
There we go.
Thank you very much for this presentations today and all the highlighting of what it's doing and doing well. And I think also the highlighting of what work and challenges still needs to be done. My comment here, it's more of a comment and maybe a seed to be planted in the mind of Department of Social Development. I echo the understanding of when there are budget cuts, there's certain areas that need to be cut. And in one of the areas in this last financial year that was cut was awareness. So organizations that you previously got quite a lot of funding for awareness raising never got. And if you look at the fact that Department of Social Development's they're informed by the white paper on the rights of the person with disability. So what happens there? Information, awareness raising. You were speaking about behavior change. That's how behavior change happens. With that awareness, with the capacity building, with the knowledge, it reduces stigma. It helps to include people, and it helps to bring towards this whole society of integration with persons with disability. So if in this new financial year, I would say if the social development is still dealing with that aspect of it, a colleague or in one of our other meetings mentioned, could other aspects of getting funding through conditional grants help with that? What other ways can we get there to still be able to organizations like us that can deal with and do capacity building and awareness raising can still go ahead and do what we love to do as partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gail. That's very, very important. I'm just waiting, while I'm waiting for Mwebisi to get back online. He was shortly for a short period of time and then disappeared again. I wonder if any of the officials from the Department of Mobility or from the Social Development Department just want to make comments around some of the issues raised while I wait for Mwebisi to actually connect again. Mr. Rob, have you got any comments around some of the issues raised, or the how people get connected with you?
Thanks very much, Deputy Speaker. I think a lot of the colleagues have hit the nail on the head. I mean, while the presentation obviously showed the good work that we're doing, there's still a minefield that has to be dealt with out there. And, I always say to the colleagues, the one thing you can be sure of is that we get a lot wrong every day as much as we try and get it right. So there's still a lot that we have to learn, a lot that we have to do. I think very particularly on the question about the monitoring and the training, I think, Deputy Speaker, you stole some of the words out of my mouth around the guide dogs on buses and planes, etc. It's something we've experienced even on our George project, where people jumping off a bus when a guide dog gets on, for instance, and just the general community not being used to something that's different in their context. And I think largely to answer that, I think that the various municipalities that implement certain services, the main monitoring lies with that specific sphere of government who's obviously implemented the service. But I do think there's a very valid point made around what we could do as a mobility department around sort of a broader element of monitoring. So I think that point is very well taken. From our perspective, the mechanism for any discrimination, we do work quite closely with the national department. And as far as I know from experience, that when there's any, specifically in the transport space, in the public transport space, any complaint, normally the complainants are encouraged to follow sort of a national process, which then gets elevated to the various national departments and to the provinces and local authorities. So there is a process in place for that. And it may well be that process needs to be more broadly shared and distributed amongst the stakeholders. Noting obviously the lots of comments around dial-a-ride, I think that's something that would need to be explored further, Deputy Speaker. And I think that's the comment from our side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rob. I note that Mwebisi is struggling with his connection. Kaya, do you have the question on behalf of Mwebisi that we can assist with?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm still just noting the question down. I will indicate as soon as it's available.
Thank you very much. I move over to Igor Rix. Over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you for the platform you created today, and also welcome to all the participants. Yes, I think just on everybody's comments, I think we all have a positive role to play in creating accessibility and inclusivity and based, and also societal integration. I think from the foundation phase, we need to bring this back to schooling. I was involved today with the Council for the Built Environment, where we talked about sustainability. What do we want to achieve by 2030 and 2050 going beyond? And one of the things that came up, and all the participants really agreed upon this, is that we need to create a sense of awareness, but also educating our children to be part of society, but with the integrated way. I mean, we have so much diversity, linguistical, cultural, but we need to have a inclusive society, and that starts with your schooling. That kids from a young age need to realize how it is to live with person with differently abled and abilities and the cultural backgrounds, because we're already partly there, but we're not fully engaged yet. And in 2001, we have the framework for inclusive schools, and we need to build upon that to say and somebody did mention on one of the first speakers about the white paper, and the the framework for inclusive and fully inclusive and accessible schools need to become a reality, because it's about the schooling, the education, as well as transport and the housing and all the different aspects of that. And I know I'm speaking to the converted, a lot of us, and we know what goes towards this and the advocacy and the awareness that goes into everyday life with NGOs and NPOs. But we need to see what we can do in terms of bringing this into education and making this a real, something that's real and tangible that people can take back and to educate ourselves, but make this our own and take ownership of this. But education is, for me, the fundamental, and we at Disability Info South Africa, which I represent, also the Western Cape Disability Network, and also Inclusive Design, where we want to get this, make this real, but we need to have the engagement of everybody. This is not a silo effect. This is something that everyone needs to take ownership of in your community, in your township, in your city, in your urban area where you stay, live and work. We need to make this work, and we have the time and all the resources and expertise in the country to make this realized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igor. It's such an important point you've raised. And so while you were speaking, I was thinking about, for example, people using guide dogs, visiting schools and educating children why this dog is special. Because never mind how much it takes to actually train a guide dog, it really takes years of training and lots of money. And these dogs are so special because they look first and foremost after their owner. I mean, they cross busy roads with their owner, and everybody is with the guide dog is totally reliant, for example, on their dog. So it is important that we start not only paying lip service to unity, to tolerance, to a really one united South Africa, no matter how different you are. It really requires an education of a massive sort. So thank you very much. Ricardo Collins, I recognize you. You may switch your camera on.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I just wanted to add on to the dial-a-ride offering that the city is doing at the moment. And I know the longer plan is that we shouldn't be looking at people with disabilities in a silo. In fact, we shouldn't be catering for them, in fact, with regards to speciality. They should be getting onto the same bus as you and I are getting onto. And that's why...
Ricardo, if I can just ask you to hold that thought for a second, if I apologize for the interruption. I just want to recognize the Premier who has just joined us, and he will be speaking shortly. Back to you, Ricardo.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And I think the important thing is that we shouldn't be isolating people with special needs. The aim should be that they get on the same bus, they get on the same taxi, they get on the same train as you and I would get onto. And I know a big drive with the National Department of Transport, particularly when it comes to public transport, is to ensure that the vehicles, for example, that we do purchase for public transport is universally accessible. They will only fund you if your vehicles that you're purchasing is universally accessible. And that's why they're pushing municipalities and governments to ensure that we become more inclusive in as far as it relates to attending to people or persons with special needs. So I know that while we want to expand the dial-a-ride service, perhaps it may lead unintentionally to a situation where we are further isolating persons with disabilities into their little silo that we have to cater for them very specifically. And it may actually lead that we lose the inclusivity that we are hoping to achieve. So I think it's a very fine line. While there's a need at the moment and we are not able to provide that universal accessibility across the board, obviously it's critical the role that the dial-a-ride service is playing at this particular stage. But I just wanted to add on that comment. Thank you very much, Deputy Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins. I think you've raised an important point too. I mean, we have to have the vehicles and the logistics that allow for freedom of movement and travel across disabilities, but at the same time, we don't want to create these little exclusive spaces that actually leads to keeps the separation instead of the universal accessibility. I absolutely agree with you. It is a fine line, and certainly one that would, I'm sure, create a conundrum amongst officials about how do you create an inclusive space, not an exclusive space. Kaya, I know now that you're ready with your question from Monwabisi.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I've spoken to Mr. Monwabisi Mkyanga. He is from Solendam. He works for disabled people of South Africa. He had a question, Deputy, and a comment. So the question was directed to the Provincial Department of Social Development. He would like to know how many people that are disabled that are employed currently by the department. And then the second comment that he wanted to make was around the children with autism. He said there is a shortage of schools and also the unemployment rate for people with autism is quite high in the province, and maybe just want to know if there are any plans to address those challenges. And then the last comment, Deputy, he made a suggestion that perhaps the province should consider establishing a committee that advise the Department of the Premier on the challenges that are faced by people living with disabilities in general. And he has volunteered his services should there be such a committee. We have also just asked him, Deputy, to send us an email with those comments. So we'll also incorporate them in our final report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kai, and thank you to Mr. Monwabisi for those questions and comments. They are being recorded. I would now like to hand over and introduce the Premier of the Western Cape Provincial Government. Premier, a very warm welcome to you today. It's really been fantastic to share input from our various stakeholders around issues they face. I must say also, I think you will be very proud. The Department of Mobility gave an excellent presentation, as well as the Social Development Department. And it's really exciting to know that they are already on the road and on the journey to looking at how mobility actually takes disability with them. Over to you, Premier.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm sorry that I couldn't join you straight up. I've unfortunately been at a long-term commitment as a regular commitment with the Auditor General of South Africa. We've got to make sure that we get our governance right. Governance, I always believe, is something that should be a habit, good governance, because once you've got good governance in place, you can focus on service delivery. And that's really a mantra that we push very, very hard in our government. So, Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. Apologies for being late. Thank you very much to the Parliament for arranging this platform. I think it's excellent. I also want to say that I was looking through the document of everybody that is attending, and that was really, really impressive to see the long list of organizations that are represented here today. And so I also want to then take the opportunity not only to thank the Parliament for putting up this platform, but for all of you who are taking part, but not only just because you're taking part. I want to thank you for the services that you give to the citizens of this province day in and day out. We really, really do appreciate every one of you and every one of your organizations. They are key. And I also understand that the environment that we find ourselves in right now, post-COVID-19, especially in the NGO, NPO sector, the difficulty in raising money right now is unbelievable. And I know that you are under very, very big pressure because businesses just do not have the CSI money that they used to have. We've got the big unemployment rates that hit us post the pandemic, and it really has become a very, very difficult environment where our demand on the one side is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and our ability to service that demand, either whether it be government or yourselves as the non-profit organizations. So really the gratitude is huge for the work that you do every single day in the interests of our citizens. I am sorry I missed the presentations on mobility because, of course, I'm really excited now that we have two new departments, a new Department of Infrastructure and a new Department of Mobility. And, of course, those two departments straight out have got to make sure that they've got mechanisms and policies in place that are enabling an environment for differently abled citizens in our province. I think the point that Ricardo was bringing up was about as much as possible, where is it about mainstreaming and about mindfulness of all citizens, of those that perhaps are challenged with some differentiated ability, and how do we enable the whole of society to really understand who and how and what everybody goes through across the board. And so, of course, between ourselves, between government, between yourselves, how do we engage with civil society in general so that we actually have a better mindfulness of this across our various organizations and across the whole of society. I also want to say that, obviously I spoke about the two new departments, infrastructure, in how they deliver and evolve around all infrastructure in our region. And that's the purpose of this new department. Up until now, we've taken a responsibility for schools and hospitals and clinics, and we've taken responsibility for roads. But what about water? What about local government infrastructure at a sewerage level, or at a water service delivery, or at an access level, wherever it is being delivered? So that's been my mission, to say with this new department, you need to now take your constitutional mandate and actually lift it so that it actually becomes a whole of society mandate, understanding that some of them are directly your constitution and your obligation, but others might not be. But you are responsible across the board in this province, and you've got to engage at local level, at national level, at international level, at whatever level, to make sure that we are actually thinking about the full picture of infrastructure. The same goes for mobility, and that we are thinking differently about mobility. So it's, it's whether it's access to internet and that mobility, the mobility of goods and services, or of course, quite critical is how do we as citizens get around our province, and are we able to? So it's from the public transport environment, as Ricardo was saying. So, is the bus enabled? Is the train enabled? How are we enabling accessibility and an open access system? So it's from a public transport point of view on the one side, right down to how do you access our beaches? And how do you access our facilities across the board? And of course, that's part of this discussion. So I really welcome it. I also want to say that obviously what the role that we play is around policy and legislation and regulation. And, we have different departments who've got different responsibilities. The Department of Social Development, who sits very much sort of in a lead space here, I think, especially around looking at national regulation, legislation, white papers, strategic plans. But then, of course, how does it come down into our departments of DSD or the Department of Health, or across all of government? And then it is also about targets. It's about employment. I was looking at some of the comments now as I came in, and I was looking at some of the comments. I'm just trying to. I can't seem to get them to move now. But I was looking at the comments. I think around. Where did I see it? Schools and dogs at schools, or service dogs, even in a restaurant. I've come across restaurants where you see someone saying, no, sorry, you can't come in here with your dog. And then there's this long explanation and fetch the manager. And why? Because there's no policy in place. There should have been one question. Please go ahead, enter. Or please, ma'am, those are the things. And they seem quite easy, but they're not there, and it's because we're not dealing with them properly through structured engagement and through structured policy in environments. And so, again, perhaps before I end on what I'm going to talk about, I thought about looking at education. So I've asked education to let us know where they are. And of course, there again, it's about how do we have full service and inclusive schools so that as many people who are differently abled are mainstreamed, because that serves so many purposes. just about that mindfulness that I spoke about right in the very beginning. And so how do we make sure that people are enabled through the processes? But then, of course, what are the other interventions where you really need to intervene, like, for example, as we do in the Pioneer School for the blind, or Noluthandu School for the deaf? How are we intervening in that space through education? And are there other things that we need to do? And then it comes back to us as government. Obviously, our government role is enabling and looking after the interests of the 7.2 million people in this province. How we spend our money, our 81 billion rand budget across all of the demands of the province, and also understanding that the pressure is on. In real terms, our budgets are getting smaller and our populations are growing way faster than our budgets can keep up with. And we are also taking on further responsibility. Now, I could very easily say, well, we are not going to take responsibility for safety. We are not going to take responsibility for safety and policing, because that is a national competency. We are not going to take responsibility for bulk water supply, because that is a national competency, or electricity. We're just going to wait and see what happens. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I swore an allegiance to the Constitution, and I also said to the citizens, I will look after you as the best as I can. And so that's why, despite, I think, some very tough conversations where I say, well, now I'm going to go and find another 1.1 billion rand to make sure that we become energy resilient, because I know that if you can't keep the lights on, then our unemployment rate is going to get worse. But to get that money, I've got to take it away from existing budgets. I don't go to national and say I need more money for energy, because I'm not going to get it. In actual fact, I get less money. Or whether it be the boots on the ground to make a difference in the murder rate, because we want to change the narrative around policing. That's 2.3 billion that we're spending on boots on the ground now, and behavior change, getting to get ahead of the curve. It's called violence prevention, understanding how we stop young boys from being drawn into the gangs and becoming not risk takers in the illicit economy and the gangs and drug space. How do they become the future entrepreneurs in our system? Right down to our government, and especially the topic for today. So I asked for a report. What is the latest update? So right now in our government, differently abled citizens who work in our departments, total now 477 individuals. And we measure our departments. We've got a target. We know the target is 2%. And I want to say that the lowest performing department, obviously that's where we've got to step in and say, how do we make sure we bring about changes? But also, how do we also recognize those departments that are doing amazing things? So I look at this saying our average is 1.9%. But if I look at the performance of departments with differently abled workforce, 3.8% is our best performer at the moment, and that's the Department of Local Government. Second is Department of Community Safety at 3.2% of employees. Number 3 is Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning at 2.8%. I can go to 4 at 2.9%, which is Provincial Treasury. I suppose maybe what I should go to my own department, Department of the Premier, who's now sitting at number 5 at 2.5%. But, we measure these things, and we make sure that we are saying, well, what's your issue of how do you get the numbers up in your various departments? What are the issues about enabling individuals that you bring in? I always use an example of my bank manager. I'm lucky enough to have had a personal bank manager. And this bank manager was my bank manager for 10 years. But I never met this individual. I only used to speak to them on the phone or via email. And I remember when I had to extend my bond, I said, well, listen, we've known each other for so long. I think it's about time we meet each other. And I walked into the bank, and you always get sent to one of these little cubicles. And my bank manager walked in, and he walked in with his guide dog. And he told me that he had been totally blind since he was a child. And he was my bank manager. And for 10 years, I didn't even know that he had, he was differently abled and he could not see. I mean, I'd phone him up and talk about my bank balance or what we're moving from one bank account to another. and I didn't even know. And why I said to him, "Jeepers, this is amazing. How are you enabled?" And he said, "This bank really looks after me, and I've got every piece of technology at my disposal so that I can deliver services to my customers." And we do exactly the same thing in this government. Wherever we can, we've got to make sure we are enabling our workforce to be able to offer the best service that they can give to the citizens. And so that's making sure we've got the right technologies in place, the right softwares in place, the right, enabling environment to make sure that those officials are enabled to offer that service. So Speaker, Deputy Speaker, thank you very much for this platform. And really, once again, thank you very much to everybody who's been taking part today.
Thank you very much, Premier. It's really good to know that we actually have a target that really looks concertatively at our enabled or disabled people, and how we actually try and improve that number from year on year. I think also you've raised the issue not only just about universal accessibility within government, but really about how we change the attitudes of our citizens. And because you talk about the lack of funding or the lack of money that's coming in specifically from our national government, the point really is that our existing infrastructure should include the opportunity for differently abledness, rather than having separate infrastructure which will cost more money. So thank you very much, Premier. It is a great honor to have you here with us this afternoon, and thank you for your time out of your busy schedule. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move over to a discussion of our stakeholder inputs. I wanted to just ask the Department of Social Development, who's not been able to as yet provide any input from the inputs that they've heard. Mrs. Moser, are you able to make any comment? Would you like to put any further input into today's discussion?
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. I've noted the comments that have been made, especially on the Department of Social Development. And to sum them up, it's more about the shrinking budget as to how then do we balance between our targets that we set versus the budget allocation. We're noting that, and also an issue that was mentioned around the impact of the budget, especially the budget cuts on organizations that are mostly focusing on awareness and educational programs. Yes, I fully agree with Ms. Davids. When we had to look as to how do we reprioritize our available budget, then the awareness was one of the victims. So we had to look as to, are we saving the polls versus, so it was one of the decisions that the department had to take, of which then if we were to get additional budgets, would try to look at that, to bring that back again in terms of resourcing. But currently, as the Premier has indicated, saying that budget, especially recovering from COVID, it's still a struggle, but we're hoping then that we'll see the light going forward. Yes, the issues, we're noting the importance of awareness, we're noting the importance of the policy education, especially now that we're talking about the awareness, raising our awareness on issues of disabilities. We're noting that. And the Premier has also touched on the issue of the employment status, of which, as the Department of Social Development, we're not doing fairly well, and we're falling below. We're at 2% exact. And around the children with autism, it's also a struggle. We understand, we note the limited available facilities to accommodate and cater for children with autism, which is a service delivery gap when it comes to our services, of which going forward, it's one of the services that we'll identify and prioritize. The issue of disability desk it was maybe it's going to be addressed in another platform when the sector engages with the Department of the Premier. I think I noted it's mainly around the budgets and the cuts, and also around this employment status. For additional input information around as to exactly in terms of the number, not percentage, I can also make that information available.
Ms. Mimosa, what about who would be look at, for example, about bridging the tolerance gap with young children and people with disabilities at a school level? How would we take that forward, you know, from a transversal governance perspective into schools, perhaps, and even with little children, because little children get it quite quickly. You know, it would be wonderful to have a day, perhaps in a year, where everybody takes their guide dogs to a school nearby because it's Guide Dog Day, and we bridge that gap in a fun and loving way, because I think there is so much positivity, even just having animals around children, but there's so much positivity to learning about something that possibly many children have no idea why a person is walking with a very steel type you know, handle with their dog. They probably just don't know, and we must take action and somehow educate young children.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker, around the comment. When I made my presentation, I indicated then that disability forces us as government departments to work together, because especially the area that you mentioned now, we working closely with the Department of Education. For instance, if we were to look at Berenice Daniels, the director on the inclusive education, she has got a major role to play. And especially when there's a white paper on or white paper 6, which talks about the inclusive education. So the discussion, the comment, I can take forward and bring also to the attention of Ms. Berenice Daniels, so that we plan as the departments to how do we then take this forward. For instance, next week we'll be sitting, we've got already a planned engagement with them. I'll also put it on the table so that it's one aspect that we need to look at. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mimosa. Are there any further inputs from our departments, from our members of Parliament? Christopher Fry, Honourable Member, would you like to make any comment from the information that you've heard? If I don't see, if I see any other members of Parliament wanting to comment here.
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me just get my effects done. Okay, here we go. Firstly, I want to thank everybody for their valued input. It is well received and it is well documented. I also want to thank the Premier for his input and his leadership in this role and in terms of the Western Cape government. And as I said, we will continue to work with the Department of the Premier in order to make sure that we take care of all our people. That'll be including anybody with any disability of any sort. So thank you so much for your valued time. Your input is much appreciated. And if anybody would like to contact me directly and to see exactly how we can make sure that we continue to work with the different disabled community stronger as a standing committee, you're welcome to contact me, and we can go forward from there. I don't know if I can give my email address in the chat, and
yes,
we will go take it from there. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Fry. I'm going to now call on the Secretary of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Mr. Secretary, are you online?
Good afternoon,
Oh,
Deputy.
there we go, Ms. Michelle.
the secretary asked me to stand in for him
Over to you.
for this. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I'm Sunal Fouchier. I'm the Director of Public Engagement for the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. So it is my pleasure to engage with you as the community of the Western Cape. I have made note of all the issues that were raised. We will document this and submit it to the Office of the Speaker, and from there it will be referred to the Members of Parliament and the relevant committees, so that it doesn't become a once-off engagement, but that we will have the opportunity to get back to you on the matters that you raised. Deputy Speaker, before I begin, I also just want to emphasize that we will share with all the participants the list of the issues raised, as well as the presentations that were made from the administration side. Thank you very much. The matters raised that will be communicated through. The first one is a recommendation, and Premier, while you're still here, it was a recommendation for the establishment of a disability desk in the Department of the Premier, or alternatively an advisory committee that can advise the Department on the Premier on matters as it relates to people with disabilities. A big issue raised, and I think it was almost everyone mentioned it, is the small or no year-on-year increases result in a budget shrinkage, putting extreme pressure on the carrying out of work, maintaining staffing levels, doing awareness, etc. There was a call for disabled people to represent themselves and guide and drive integration and disability projects in the province. A matter was raised, I think it was Honourable Brinkhuis, that the focus should not only be on the provisioning of mobility, but on the ensuring that such mobility is reliable and dependable. There was an issue regarding special measures that should be put in place to protect people with disabilities from crime, particularly with public transport and particularly in the disadvantaged areas where people are more vulnerable and prone to being attacked. Universal accessibility is broader than just wheelchair-bound people and should be integrated and inclusive. Above infrastructure, the people element is challenging for people with disabilities, particularly as it pertains to guide and support animals. There was a very important point, well, they're all important, but this one was repeated quite a few times as well. I think the Premier also alluded to that integrated schooling is critical to grow inclusive societies. And then the last one that was raised is specifically pertaining to children on the autism spectrum, that special needs education in schools for people with autism, particularly outside of the Cape metropolitan area, is very scarce, and it results in high unemployment amongst people on the autism spectrum. So, Deputy Speaker, these were the issues that were raised by the stakeholders, and this will be submitted to the Office of the Speaker for further processing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fouchier, for sharing those summary of the key matters that have been raised. I really think that there are pertinent points that have come out of quite a short roundtable discussion, and very, very valid to be able to take forward. What the process will be now, ladies and gentlemen, is that, as Ms. Fouchier has indicated, she will draw up the minutes of this meeting, which will be recorded, will go to the Speaker, and the Speaker will process this almost as a report, which will go through the House to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament during a session for adopting. And then the committees would then take the various points that apply to them and drive them through the various committees. Some will be same points happening in every committee, and I would imagine trying to push the disabled employment positions up in the various departments, and some would just relate to certain departments, for example, just to the Department of Mobility. But I think that what is important, that this becomes a record for tabling and for support at a parliamentary level and then for actioning to the various government departments. So, ladies and gentlemen, stakeholders, members of parliament, our various departments themselves, officials, and Department of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament administration, thank you very much for a very, very fruitful discussion. I certainly, as a Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the Speaker, want to thank you for making the time, and we commit to having regular interaction with you. What's important, though, is that these points are not just shelved, but they are tabled for actioning, and we will have to make sure, no matter what, that when we have our second roundtable discussion, that these points are able to be fed back to you as to how far they have gone and to where we are, so they become a measurement of further interactions. Thank you very much. Our departments will be in touch with you, and we look forward to further engagement. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.